where you are as far as best in class, right? Like where on that 1 to 6 common sense scoring scale you fall and how that is impacting them all, because that's where you can really dive into the intangibles, right? And where most of the value is those roles that don't necessarily directly drive revenue. So if, as an owner, you do that on a regular basis, share the results with the key leaders of the team, and then they can disseminate that down to their teams, I think that's how you create a more of an owner mindset mentality, right? A long-term value.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider, hanging out with my longtime friend, Josh Koza, who I invited onto the podcast because many of you in the EPI world know that he is our Director of Strategic Relationships and sits on our company's executive team. You guys, if you follow Josh and EPI's story, Josh is one of the originals, a part of EPI, and was a major hire for me when we were in some of our early growth stages at EPI. I think it's probably like number 3 or 4 employee or something like that, right? And I invited Josh onto the show because if you've been following here in season 4, we've been really theming this season around how do we create a value creation mindset throughout the entire organization, from business owner all the way through all employees at the organization, and really focused around 2 of the 4 capitals that we have inside of the value acceleration methodology: human capital and social capital. So the people component and the culture component. If you were following along in our first few episodes here with Fred Johnson, we laid the groundwork for what Josh and I ended up going through in 2020, which was this leadership transformation project. And in that, Josh played a key role because Josh has been here now for 10 years. And Josh saw and joined a organization of old and was really a big part of this big pivot that we were talking about with Fred on the last couple of episodes. So I wanted to continue to use our own company, Exit Planning Institute, as a case study. And I thought, as Fred and I over the last couple episodes have laid out some of the foundation of what leadership transformation is, I would bring in somebody from inside the organization to kind of share their story as well. So one of the key things, Josh, that we talked about was this brick wall moment for me where after we had pivoted the company, I called it, I was like running at 200 miles per hour and quite literally slammed into one of these cinder block walls because I was told that the entire organization, which would have been 11 people at the time, were all looking for jobs elsewhere. And I said in those episodes that it was a series of emotions, and one of the biggest emotions was because people like you go way beyond just doing business together. We were friends well before we got into business together. So why don't we start there and maybe paint the scene a little bit and talk about, you rewind 15 years ago when we met. So why don't you go through that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, I was just talking to somebody the other day how long it's been. Mm-hmm. But so obviously our journey at EPI has been 10 years now, but I never remember the actual year. It was either 2010 or 2011. But we had known each other through the soccer community, mm-hmm. right? We played soccer at the same place. And then it was one of those Thanksgiving Eves that our mutual friend, also Scott Cunningham, said, "Hey, Scott Snider's doing getting a group of people together, take a party bus out to go out the night before Thanksgiving." Yeah. And he said, "You want to go? It's like $50 or whatever to chip in towards the limo." And I said, "Sure, yeah, absolutely." So he picked me up and we're headed to your house. And I'd never been there, didn't know where you lived on the way. I said, "So where does Scott live anyway?" And he goes, "Oh, he lives over on Cranage Road." And I remember he said that, and I said, You mean Cranage Road?" He's like, "Yeah, whatever. Why?" And I was like, "Well, I grew up on Cranage Road." He's like, "Wow, no kidding." So yeah, like 4 houses down across the street from where you live now. So I remember walking in that night and standing in the kitchen. You came over and saying, "Thanks for having me. This is really cool. Appreciate it." And I guess the rest is kind of history from
right?
there, right? Yeah. So
interestingly enough, I am selling that home right now too, right? I lived there for probably I guess almost 18 years, 17 years or something like that. And we had many of the cigar on the front porch. We were laughing because every time we never decided to have a cigar on that front porch during the summer months. It always is in the winter months, right? So we'd be out there in our Carhartt jackets and just and smoking a cigar out there. But yeah, I mean that's where for me where it was all started, right? It was that as really kids, right? Because you're even younger than me. You know, I had just moved into that home. We were showcasing the home to our friends. We were one of the first people in our friend group to buy that place, and ever since then we stayed in touch. And we had talked about doing business together. In fact, in that very same home. I used to have an office upstairs, and in that office was just like raggedy old blue recliner chair. And we sat down in that. You sat down in that chair once, and we were just having a discussion in the office. I guess we wanted to like keep it formal or something. I don't know why we weren't down in the kitchen or something. And we had talked about doing business together. Now, at the time, for the audience, Josh was living in Columbus, which is about 2 hours south of Cleveland, which is where both Josh and I are from, and where we live today. And I said, one day we got to get you back home, and we have to get you inside of EPI, and we should do some business together. And that blue chair moment, if you will, was we were actually planning for him to come back to Cleveland in like 2 years, right? 2 years' time, we're going to work back. And I said, look, I'll be at a position in EPI to bring you in, and we'll talk about what kind of role we have at that time. And I ended up having to call you 2 years early. Because we had to, unfortunately, part ways with an employee. And I said, look, I need a guy. And people heard this story before inside of my entrepreneurial career. I had always said, look, as long as you have the talent and the skill, I'll take your care. I know your character. I know your work ethic. And I said, Josh, have you ever like ran events and done educational programming? And you're like, I don't think so, but seems like I'm in.
Yeah, no, I remember it vividly. I was, I certainly had no relevant professional experience in this industry at the time, and I was sitting in a literal truck terminal, and I got a text from you that said, "What do you know about running events, and how soon can you move back to Cleveland and start?" And this was like first week of December. And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about running events, but happy to learn. And can you give me 2 months? Like I got to sublease my apartment, a serious longtime girlfriend at the time. So there's some logistical things, right? And so got a official job offer from you. I think I actually sent you my resume at some point. You're like, hey, can you shoot me over a resume? Chris wants to see it. Yep. We have some formality here. And but yeah, then I talked with Ashley and decided that was what we wanted to do. So signed the offer letter on January 3rd. It was on Monday. I sent that, I believe it was the 3rd, sent it back to you, proposed to her on Friday, and then moved back a month later. Started on February 15th. We were just talking about this, February 15th. So,
yeah, man. I mean, I guess I didn't piece that all together, right? You say, okay, sign the job offer. I'm going to get engaged. Did you actually know that you wanted to move back, or you save that till after the engagement?
No, we had talked about it. We didn't know what it was. So she was committed to moving to Cleveland with me to take the job, and so so that proposal was going to be in the near future. Just maybe bumped it up a little bit to
talk to us. So you arrive at EPI, right? And when you arrived at EPI, we had just moved into, I would say, our first official office, right? The history of EPI, like any other small business, when Dad and I bought EPI, we worked out of our bedrooms in my house, right? Literally my childhood bedroom in my dad's house became my office. And I would drive from my house, the one that you met me at, over to his house to go into the office every morning. And then we were in a position a couple of years after that, this was, to maybe 2015 to actually start hiring some employees. So we couldn't afford much. So we just got a single couple offices in the back of a building that is now a cigar shop in Lakewood, Ohio. And then when you started to come on board, we need to actually upgrade, right? We had maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 5 employees by then. And we had I would say a C level, kind of like a C grade kind of office, but nevertheless, a formalized office. And you came in originally as I would say, kind of like a jack of all trades, where me and you kind of partnered up to split up the work, right? We were doing some member relations, some sales, event programming, and event management. A lot of the stuff that you see today in bigger, grander form, we were doing when it was only like 20 people in a SEPA class and 100 people at an exit planning summit. But you ran that route for, I guess that would have been almost 5 years, until we kind of hit that brick wall moment in 2020. But talk to us about life inside of a highly entrepreneurial, rapidly growing company, because in that time frame, even in those short 4 or 5 years, you went from about 200 certified exit planning advisors in the community to 2,000 certified exit planning advisors in the community.
Yeah, well, and I think just to comment on a point you made, you said Class C office space. Remember, I was coming from a truck terminal, so for me it was certainly an upgrade. I had an actual office right with the door that closed. So, no, I think that was a crazy 5 years, right? And I think coming in with, again, no relevant professional industry experience, not knowing anything about professional services, certainly about exit planning, although interestingly enough, the 2 companies I worked for prior went through transitions, much larger organizations, but one sold to a strategic buyer, and then one was going through an ESOP actually while I was there. But at the time, as a 24-year-old kid, I didn't really process what that meant or that I was going to end up making a career in that particular industry. But I think that, in that first year, doing a little bit of everything, right? We sold somewhere in the had about 120 SEPAs, something like that, sign up that year, which is crazy, because I think last month we had like 400 in a class, which is, and so, it's just a decade later. But I think that you made I think you said jack of all trades, and that's a good way to describe it. I kind of describe it as like a Swiss Army knife. Like that's what you have to have in employees at the time when you're a small organization. And I think that is, to your point about hiring someone that you knew, that you trusted, that was going to work hard, roll up their sleeves, do a little bit of everything, kind of make it happen, is what you need. Because in those early stages, even for you and Chris, right, you're in a revenue generation, chasing revenue mode, right? And so you're just trying to keep the doors open, you're trying to provide for yourself and your family, and certainly for the handful of employees that you have on board. And so then, you start to grow and mature as an organization, right? Over those years, we started to see an increase in the number of advisors going through the SEPA program. We were growing as an organization. We're adding employees there. And I think that one of the, in my experience, is that seeing owners, as they mature, as they form teams and departments, right, the hiring process becomes more formal. You have an actual job description and interview process. You require resumes to be submitted, right? You're looking for specialized individuals. But what doesn't change is the mindset shift that we talk about, right? That income generation to value creation, right? And I don't think, certainly in that first 4 or 5 years, that wasn't even necessarily a mindset that I fully grasped and adopted, right? I think I'm a person that's very motivated by a kind of a singular goal, right? And so we joke, right? The nickname at the time when I was selling was the revenue doctor, right? So we had, and hanging up those big sticky notes on the door with our target number, and every time we signed someone up for the program, we were crossing it off,
taking
right?
it
So
off.
Chasing that and seeing the big wins along the way, right? And seeing those classes grow from 50 advisors in a class up to 70, 80, 90 that we were seeing in 2019, right before the pandemic brought us to a screeching halt. So again, I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little off track from what your original question was there, but I think just reflecting in real time, I think on that journey, right? And my role shifting from a little bit of everything, sales, customer service, event management, to then we brought someone on to really manage the events. So it was more focused on the sales and customer service. Then we hired our first true traditional salesperson, brought in a salesperson into the organization. I remember introducing, he introduced like a commission structure, right? Like a commission salesperson, right? Something new to us as an organization, right? So you start to begin to become more formalized. You've got those individuals that are specialized. At the time, then I transitioned into managing just the call it client experience at the time, member experience, client experience, and really built the model out for what that customer service side and solution side of the business was, right up until, and this might be a good kind of segue into what you want to talk about next, right into that 2019, 2020
big shift
era.
But during that time, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. I think it would be interesting. Like during that time, you mentioned it hit me because you said you were like 24 years old at that time, right? So pretty young in your career, still growing in your career. But now, whether you knew it or not, right, at the time, you're taking a pretty critical role in a rapidly growing company. You were basically like my number 2 guy, right? It was basically me and you that were running EPI and growing EPI in those really early days. It was like, to your point, you came in to do all 3 things and then got specialized each year as we grew, right? You were able to offload event management to a specific event manager. You were able to offload sales to a specific salesperson. And then you kind of kept in member experience and operations, which is where I spent actually a lot of my time too. Like by that time, I wasn't really selling because we had a salesperson doing that, and I wasn't necessarily managing the events because we had event management. So we kind of always stuck together. If you had another, and maybe age isn't it. Maybe the question is if you had another person that was kind of the right-hand person to a high, like a visionary entrepreneur, what made you successful, do you think, during that time? Can you recall what, like some of the elements of how you were building your trajectory? Like what was it like working for me?
Man, there's a lot to unpack with that. That's a loaded question, I think. No, it's well, I think first and foremost, I think the backstory there is we were friends before we were colleagues in the workplace. And we sat down before in those conversations, and you sat down with Ashley and said, like, this is, there's a risk in hiring friends, right? That this could go sideways, things could go poorly. You might choose to leave. I might have to fire you, right? Those are the real scenarios.
These are the realities,
and what does that do, and how does that affect our existing friendship, right? And you were the best man in my wedding there after I started, right? So like there's a lot there that's on the table. And I think one of the things that you and I have always been pretty good at doing is separating church and state, so to speak, right? Like we have a personal relationship and we have a professional relationship, and there is always going to be that crossover, right? And I think that actually helps to have that. But we do, when we're at work, it's work. When we're hanging out with our families outside of work,
we try not to bleed it together.
It's social, right? And so there's always going to be times where the business comes and we talk about it, but we're pretty segmented about that. And I think that's important, like to have that. And I don't know that there was no formal way we did that. I think we just kind of had this.
I think to your point, though, I can remember sitting down with you and Ashley, too, and this is a good point, I think, for the audience in bringing either family members in or I mean, even though Josh is not my biological family, we're close enough that I think we consider that, where you just had to know that we were willing to have our relationship change, right? And we said, look, if it does go south, we will be sacrificing something special that we have. And we were just, I guess, we had the conversation and then decided we were willing to take that risk, knowing that it would be unlikely that it happened, but if it did, it did. And it would likely, it's kind of like breaking up with a girlfriend, right? Like, I don't know too many people that are like befriending their girlfriends and boyfriends after they break up, right? Like, it would just forever change our relationship. So I remember that. What was it like, though, like diving deeper into the business? Back then it was like Wild West, right? Like we were quite literally, like we had no formal marketing plan. To your point, I think it's a good way, and a lot of the audience that owns businesses and advises business owners, you guys understand that it is about revenue generation. We were after their numbers. Why don't you tell your story about hitting your 50th SEPA at the Chicago program and going to that nightclub?
That was the first 3 months we were here, right? So we had set a goal, came on board in February, and we had a May SEPA program there in Chicago. And so we set a goal for getting 50 people signed up for that program. I never had 50 in a program before. So I kind of put a big sticky note, one of those large post notes on the back of my door in my office, and had every number individually written. And as one signed up, I was kind of doing a cross-off countdown until we had 0 left. And I remember we hit it. And it was a big moment. We sold 50 SEPAs into the program. And so you said, we're going to go do something special and celebrate. So we flew up to Chicago. We went in early, flew up Friday morning, and spent the day in Chicago. And that night I think the deal was we were going to go to this nightclub, and we were going to get a glow in the dark
Dom bottle.
Dom bottle, right? So we go to this nightclub, end up getting the booth right next to the DJ stage, and sure enough, ordered that bottle. They brought this bottle with fireworks coming out of it, and it's glow in the dark bottle out to And it was obviously a super fun night with friends out and celebrating the win, but it was it's a cool moment to reflect on, right? Because I think you do need to celebrate the wins along the way, but the wins change, right?
Yeah.
And the goalposts keep moving, right? Because 50 SEPAs in a program in 2016 was a really big deal, but we just talked about how we had over 400, in the program, the most recent SEPA program. So I think celebrating the wins and understanding, but also I think that's good to reflect on. And I sometimes joke too that I'm the come from guy, right? That have been around a long time. So talking about what it used to be like, and certainly the pre-COVID era, I kind of split up EPI into like the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic version of the organization. And it's cool that you started this part of the series of this season with Fred, because I think that was obviously just such a huge pivotal moment and influence on us as an organization.
Yeah, so I think, and I would say we've probably been through 4 phases at EPI. There's the revenue generation phase and the fun phase of a startup kind of company, right? And even though EPI technically wasn't a startup when we bought it in 2012, we only had about 100 SEPAs, right? So it was pretty infancy. So you have this stage in your business where you're chasing dollars, it's about revenue generation, and when you hit big goals, you have a lot of fun with your very small team. Then there's like this phase of, I think, professionalizing the business and a maturity level of the business, which is, I think, what we hit in 2020. And what you're seeing that I think we're a part of now today is a sophistication level of the company and a formalization of the company, truly professionalizing the business. Well, you guys heard about in the last couple of episodes with Fred Johnson, we referred to this brick wall moment where, again, we're sitting on that call, and 11 of our employees, including you, are sitting there saying, "Man, we're looking for jobs. It's real tough around here. It's not the culture that we've lost the fun component. We've lost the we're it's more than just chasing dollars now. We have to professionalize, and we're struggling, and we're sitting inside of that, and we start to have this change where I'm calling the change that we had is, for me, I realized that we had built a strong company in terms of like the X's and O's and the systems and the marketing and the sales strategy, but we had really built a company that was about me and not about we. Even though you and I are close, I don't know if I ever looked at you and said, "Josh, what kind of company do you want to work with?" It was always, "Josh, I want you to come work for me, and we're going to run the business this way, and I need you to do these types of things." It wasn't the flip side where we truly got together and said, "Let's build a company that we both love showing up to every day, and with the collective we in mind, and not me." Do you remember that 2020 pivot outside of even the SEPA program and into the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was, we've certainly talked about it a lot, but I think that was the biggest moment, my perspective, in EPI's history, right? Is that because not only, yes, right, the pandemic happens and you're a company that provides in-person education programs. So of all the businesses that were immediately impacted by that, like, comes to a screeching halt, right? Yeah. So you either had the option to figure out what to do really fast, or we were just going to go out of business, right?
We had 2 months, March and April, no revenue.
And I remember that because I was actually I was back on the business development team at the time.
Okay.
And so when you send everyone home, I didn't have anything to sell. I just didn't really have anything because we couldn't sell any of those in-person programs.
Right.
And we had a lot of programs that had been pre-sold for later in the year that now we were either going to be, we had to fulfill on that revenue that was collected.
Exactly.
But I think, to your point, more than just the dollars of it and the revenue there was a big issue with the culture, I think, in the organization. I think, I think mindsets of individuals. I think that there's, especially maybe when you're a smaller company, you're willing to allow some of that to persist longer than it should. I think because you're afraid of the disruption of making a change, right? You're like, well, we're still hitting our goals, we're still making money, so we're just gonna kind of keep on with it and not really take the time collectively to understand like what this was doing to everyone and ultimately how that was affecting the organization. Because while we were all just keeping on, there was, if not everyone, certainly a large contingent of people who would have left if the right offer came on the table at that time, and how detrimental that could have been to an organization.
When I was talking to Fred, and you know Fred well, we were talking about the put it on the table conversations and the deliver the mail to the right address conversations. And to your point, I don't think any of us, me included, were in the mindset to have those types of conversation. Remember, you just said, we're hitting goals, right? So we pivoted the whole SEPA program. We're back on the revenue track. We're back on the revenue train. We're getting people back to work. We're fulfilling SEPA programs. Like, what possibly could be wrong? One of the things that I thought was unique about Fred's program is that it all started with finding personal purpose, which I think we came down to about 8 or 9 of us that ended up in that original group completing the entire program together. All 8 of us had to come up, over those 9 or 10 sessions, we had to figure out what our personal purpose was. And that was really how we became very proactive, deliberate, and intentional leaders. So what was your personal purpose? What was that discovery like for you? And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your personal purpose, I think that plays a lot into the work that you do today.
Yeah, I think it 100% does. And so when it came down to the final output of that program was the 2 to maybe 3 word definition of what your personal purpose was. And mine was to create significant relationships, build significant relationships, which my title of my job now is Director of Strategic Relationships, right? So I think there's clear alignment there, but I think that was really an eye-opening experience for me professionally, but also personally. I think that I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it was like life-altering, right? I think some people have, but it was certainly impactful in my relationship. It was at home with my wife. At the time, we only had one. We had our daughter when the pandemic hit, she was 9 months old, our first.
Yep.
But just thinking about life through a relationship lens, right? And that's really where I think my highest and best use was. And reflecting back on the first, at that point, 5 or 6 years at the organization, having a chance to do some of that, but I had, again, gone from that Swiss Army knife of doing everything to now feeling I was on member experience, and I went over to business development, purely transactional sales. And none of those really felt like it was the right fit for me professionally. And I think that's what led me to having the conversation with you, even a little bit before the pandemic, about wanting to leave the organization. I mean, I spent a ton of time there, but maybe my personal brick wall moment was even a little bit pre-pandemic. And I think that was in large part because it just didn't have a role that really aligned. But I didn't, at the time, because I hadn't gone through Fred's program, that's why I was feeling that way. And so that kind of really aligned it for me, was, again, both personally and professionally, was looking at what I'm doing through a relational lens. And there's certainly, in my role now, there's certainly a sales component to it, right? But it's driven by relationships, right? And so I think that I finally found a seat and a role and a team that allows me to do that every single day, which is why I wake up and really truly enjoy going to work.
And I would say it draws the certain partner into our network now as well, right? Like, one of the things me and Fred were talking about was these 8, 9s, and 10s, right? Not necessarily saying bad people, just not right for our organization purpose, and we're just not aligned. Knowing your purpose and being in this director of strategic relationships role now at a company that's 10 times the size of what it was when you first started, how are you using purpose in your role to fulfill your role today at EPI?
Yeah, I think it starts internally on my own team, right? Thinking about creating significant relationships is really investing in the relationship I have with the members of my team. And I think that's certainly different than relationships with other employees at the organization and with you, and certainly outside of the business, but intentionally building that relationship in a way that I'm supporting, coaching, mentoring, empowering them, giving them that accountability with authority, one of our core values, to be able to go out and feel empowered and that they're in a position to succeed in their role and staying out of their way. I think that, to your point about attracting the right partners, I think that it allows me to really, again, intentionally evaluate who the right partners are, but also be open and transparent with them that maybe we're not the right partner for them. It's not just us saying like, yeah, you're not right for us. Everyone needs to partner with us, but we get to pick the right ones. It's we might not be the right partner for somebody else. And I think understanding that when you go into these conversations about potential partnership and relationship opportunities is really just putting it on the table. Like, what does success look like for you in this? What does success look like for EPI in this potential relationship? Knowing that it might not be a match, but we'd rather figure that out now rather than a year from now, 2 years from now, where we've ventured down this path, spent all this time together, we've exchanged money, whatever the relationship is, and then it breaks up because it feels like we kind of wasted a couple of years' time. So on the front end, being able to identify those opportunities, have those conversations, and really develop truly how I would describe as a mutually valuable relationship between us and any other organization.
How do you feel about purposeful growth? And so one of the things that I've started to put together about our culture and the way we implement both the human and social capital side is I've put it into these kind of 4 boxes, right? There's a mentality that we have to have, and for us, you know this, right? It's the value acceleration methodology. It's the core values we live by. It's the trust accelerators, these principles that we live by. 2, we have a vision, right? We have a 10-year vision. We have a 3-year strategy. We have a 1-year plan and then 90-day sprints, right? Those are very apparent in our business. Then we have a rhythm. There's a way that we do business. You're having one-on-ones with your team. We're having company-wide meetings. We're having quarterly renewals, retreats, so on and so forth. And everybody's kind of tied to the last bucket, which is performance. But one of the things that I think needs to be wrapped around all of that is a pursuit of what we call a pursuit of excellence, not necessarily perfectionism, but a pursuit of excellence where you haven't quite arrived, but you're always just fine-tuning your craft and looking across kind of business, personal, and financial goals. And so how do you continue to kind of revisit and push yourself in the business to kind of have that, not just the mentality or not just a rhyme and reason inside of those buckets, but continue to push yourself to live on purpose and stay focused for the future?
Yeah, I think purposeful growth is, and I'm glad this is one of our core values. I think it's so important, is that you have to continually be evolving, right? And again, going back to I didn't have any professional experience in this industry when I started, so by many measures, I wouldn't have been qualified for the job or what I was going to be doing. And I kind of keep that same mindset now looking forward, is as we grow as an organization, as the hierarchy changes or expands, and who's the executives and leaders at an organization is asking myself the question, like, am I qualified for that role? Like, am I the best person out there? And what am I doing to make sure that I am, right? To not make someone like you and Chris say, like, maybe we should look outside because we need someone with more experience in this role or who's done this before. So how am I looking outward into the future? What does this role of the future look like? What skills do I need to develop? And you do a great job of obviously providing that coaching and feedback as a leader to us, as here's some areas of focus we think we can work on together. And I think that's important to instill throughout the organization, right? And for me to do that with my team too. I think with purposeful growth, I think you need a self-starter mentality, right? You have to want to do it yourself. But I also think there's an obligation by the organization, by your leaders, to provide some coaching, insight, advice on that. Not so much as to say, here's your professional development plan for the year, here's the things you need to go and do. Because you need to balance that with someone who wants to do that, right? You can't force someone to become a better performer. Sure. So you have to find the balance of they're seeking out opportunities, they're coming back to you with, here's what I'd like to pursue, here's why I think this would be valuable for me in my role now and the role of the future. And then being able to support them through that at the same time.
Yeah.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial. And with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding. Yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the second edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a CPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
So one of the other things that I think has been really cool for you is now we've moved through this pivot in coming through 2025. We've really been challenged now to think more like value creators. And what the conversation becomes is, now that we have these foundation, this bedrock of knowledge around making great decisions, high-performing teams, and high-performing cultures, we can tie all of it to long-term value. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is not just change owners' mindsets from income generation to value creation, but the employee's mindset to income generation or risk reduction or leads generated. We want you to do all of that, and that ties into short-term company successes and gains. But I want you to put your value creation hat on and tie it to long-term value. And I think now in an organization where you're not necessarily the Swiss Army knife anymore, you're one of 4 key executives at EPI. The company has 51 employees, has over 8,000 certified exit planning advisors in the marketplace. We have a pretty big organization now. It's not the champagne bottle at the Chicago nightclub and the revenue doctor on the door. It's much more professionalized and mature in that. And one of the biggest changes I saw in you in 2025 was you just almost had like an aha moment where we've been teaching you value creation and value acceleration for 10 years. And I think something hit for you, something changed where you're like, now I get it. I understand what you mean by success to significance, what you mean from income to value creation. So can you talk about, as an employee here at EPI, how you've now adopted this value creation mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was the next aha moment. I think if Fred in the Initiative One training was kind of the first aha moment for me personally and professionally, like this past, that last year was the second one. And I'm trying to put my finger on what the particular thing was. I don't know if it was one thing. I think what happened in 2025, one of the things that you had challenged me to do at the end of the previous year for 2025 was to start speaking on EPI's behalf more. Right up until that point, it was primarily you, still Chris to some extent, but mostly you. Whether it was a chapter launch, a conference, a CEPA event, it was you. So to be able to decentralize yourself a little bit, to do that, and so I did that quite a bit. It was something I made a priority for myself, and so and those conversations were with different audiences, and so I certainly learned a lot just about speaking in a public forum, but also about different audiences, whether it's solely one single advisor, like a group of financial advisors, whether it's a group of business owners, or some of the settings were a blend of those, right? One of them was a symposium where you had current owners looking to sell, prospective buyers, and their advisors all in the same setting, which was, I think that was a large part of it, was the trying to educate others about it. Maybe that was the final piece. And in doing that was making the messaging my own, right? Not changing the core of it. But when I go out to give a presentation, I'm not giving Scott's presentation, and I'm not reciting Scott's speech. I'm not going to watch a recording of a webinar you did or a presentation you gave, and I'm just going to memorize that and recite it on stage, because it's not authentic. And so I really found that I had to make that my own. And it took me some time, to do that throughout the year. And I think when that happened, I think I was educating other people in a way that was like re-educating myself almost. And so I think that's when it really started to hit for me, right? And to think about, from a revenue perspective, particular to my team, as we're looking at like sponsorship for a particular event that we're hosting, is you have your revenue, and then you have your gross margin, then you have your net operating profit. And so you know the general mathematical equation of what is your average profit margin. And so thinking about decision making in terms of that, because if you think about that, $100,000 is going to drop to the bottom line from this particular event or this sales initiative, et cetera, et cetera. But then you look at it from a multiple perspective. And so you'd say, well, that, potentially for round numbers, let's say is a 10 multiple, right? That's not a $100,000 decision anymore. It's $1 million decision, exactly. Right? And so you start to think about long-term value in decision making. So yes, in the short-term income generation, you've made $100,000, but you've also generated and created $1 million of value for the organization in a year, 2, 3, 5 years from now. And so that's something that I really latched on to, like that finally clicked for me, right, last year. And so in my decision making, and then the next challenge is to because if it took me that long, 10 years, to really figure that out, how do I help my team adopt that same mindset? So at the end of 2025, we did our team annual like strategic planning session after our executive retreat. And that's kind of what I opened up with, was I did talk to them about how that was an aha moment for me that last year. And so what I want them to do, I need them to do, is to start thinking that way as well. And so how do you do that? So talking to them through the formulaic approach to it, that's easy, from revenue, profit, and then times the multiple. The more challenging component is for the non-revenue generating individuals, right? And so there's individuals on my team that don't directly generate revenue for the organization, right? They're in a relationship support operations type role. So how do you quantify, and how do they start to think about the quantification of what they're doing to long-term value? Because it's easy when you take a number, multiply it by another number, you get a number. But from a structural capital perspective, right? If someone's there documenting standard operating procedures, improving efficiencies on the team, how does that equate to long-term value? And so I think that's still an area for myself to continue to learn more.
Yeah.
Right? But also, and I think that's why, I was actually thinking about this. I think that's why we talk about owners doing a triggering event, right? You go through a triggering event, you understand your business and personal readiness. And so from a business attractiveness and readiness perspective, not only, and this came out of the presentations we were given last year at the Drive Value Summits to owners, right? The call to action was to go get a triggering event, but not only just do that, but to share that with your key leadership team. Because then you can really get a sense of where you are as far as best in class, right? Like where on that 1 to 6 common sense scoring scale you fall, and how that is impacting the multiple, because that's where you can really dive into the intangibles, right? And where most of the value is those roles that don't necessarily directly drive revenue. So if, as an owner, you do that on a regular basis, share the results with the key leaders of the team, and then they can disseminate that down to their teams, I think that's how you create a more of an owner mindset mentality, right? A long-term value creation mentality.
I would, one of the things that I would say when looking at, because I obviously know your team well, is, to your point, yes, there are some revenue generators on that team, and then there's some operators on that team that are like client success managers that really help everything go and fulfill the work that is being sold. I look at it as one person is controlling dollars and one person is actually controlling the multiple. Because remember, if you go all the way back to the basics of value acceleration, if Chris was here and you're sitting in one of his modules or reading Walking to Destiny, he would say that valuation, to keep it simple, is some form of cash, whether it's revenue, more likely recast EBITDA times a market multiple equals value. Mm-hmm. So as you're looking at generating profitable revenue, and you to your point, man, like we generated an extra $100,000 of net profit this year on our team because we did things this way, and our existing multiple is a 10. That means that we generated an extra $1 million of value, our team, this year. Now, the people in that operational role that are documenting how you fulfill the work, there's a way in which the strategic relationship team at EPI does strategic relationships. Like you have a recipe book of what that looks like, that documentation, that workflow, that subculture that we have. We have an upcoming guest, Ben Utek, who's a chief culture officer. He talks about documenting your culture and then managing it and measuring it and scaling it. You have a subculture, a part of the strategic relationship team. And as your operator, call it a success manager, documents and fulfills all of that and allows us to begin to renew all of that, one could challenge that person is actually taking us from a 10 multiple to an 11 or 12. So some people are controlling where we fall in the range while others are driving that the dollar number. And I think that's and that's what we want you guys all thinking. Now the tough part is, and I'd like to see your opinion on this, is as an employee, not an owner, as an employee, we're teaching you how to generate value. I believe in as an owner, there has to be some type of compensation around it, because you're not going to, when you tick the multiple from 10 to 12 or you drop another $100,000 to EBITDA, although you might get perhaps a monetary raise in your base salary because you're a value-creating, high-performing, best-in-class employee, you're not necessarily participating in the value that you created unless there's some form of structure. And I think that's one of our big things now in our own business, EPI, is now that we have a value-creating culture, how are we compensating our employees to help drive value? So what are some of your thoughts on how that can return for the employee?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think that you obviously have to compensate your best employees well. Just they have to be compensated well so they don't leave and go somewhere else, right? We have to employee retention. And I am of the belief, right or wrong, that every individual at an organization should have some clear incentive program in front of them. Not like commissions, not necessarily commission structure, but some incentivizing program that pushes them or gets them to do just a little bit more, right? And that, I mean, that does come from a standard sales commission tier structure is built to get that sales rep or business development manager to do a little bit more. They can see the kick that gets for them because they're going to go now to a higher tier, and that's going to be retroactive on all of the sales for that time period. But if there was that incentive, and there's some challenge there on how do you incentivize every person, particularly non-revenue producing roles. This is a debate we still have on our own team. But I think because I think that starts to shift the mindset towards thinking like an owner, because they're just seeing if I do more, it's going to drive more. But it is still on the income generation side. Yeah. So how do we tie that value creation, value growth back? Like, how do you participate in that? And I don't think I have the foolproof answer to that, certainly, but I think, as someone inside an organization, I think the concept of some sort of phantom stock, right, to be able to participate in that. I think if there's some way to participate in the value growth of the organization, right? Not everyone's been there from day one. I haven't even been there technically since day one. But if we understand where the value of the organization was when someone came on board to where it ends up being at some future point, like how do you incentivize those individuals or compensate them for that contribution to that?
I think that's the question, right? I
right.
think that's the question where you're at, right? It was, we've spent now a decade creating a value creation culture, and now we're trying to say, look, we would like to, and I think like to compensate for it. And I think you bring up a good point where you do challenge at the executive level. You challenge the owners and your fellow executives to build out formal, structured incentive programs across all roles. And maybe it's just that, right? You're saying, look, we want to drive an X amount of value, and we're gonna compensate you on the value that is driven. So as we come to the top of the hour here, I have to ask, as both a decade-long team member here at EPI, a key executive here at EPI, and to your point, somebody that's out there in the public eye more so than ever before with you on the speaking circuit. What excites you for the future, right? We, at the end of 25, we went through a little bit of a reorg. We're getting ready here in about a month and a half to hit our exit planning summit in Nashville. We have the DriveValue.com campaign and our Growth and Impact Week coming up in June. A lot of new stuff. It's almost like another evolution of EPI. Our last evolution was certainly the pivot of our programs to online, and we're kind of in another revolutionary kind of year for EPI. What are you excited about here this year?
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of new ideas that Scott comes up with any given year. And apparently this year he got his way and got many of them.
Yes, right? It's finally coming true.
At the same time. No, I think we've been talking about this for 20 years, since they founded the Exit Planning Institute in 2005, and Pete and Rich wrote the $10 trillion opportunity. I think that we're finally in, and the data shows that over the next 5 to 10 years, like, there is going to be a massive transition of businesses. So we have to capitalize on that as in the industry, and that's certainly to the benefit of the Exit Planning Institute, but the community of advisors, ultimately affecting the business owners, right? And we've all heard this stats over and over again, so we don't need to recite all of them here from that survey. But I think it's not just a financial incentive for everyone involved in this ecosystem. I think it's just the legacy impact, right? And this is something you and Chris talk strongly about, is why you're in business and why you're particularly in this business, is to the impact you can leave on the economy, on the country, certainly leave a stamp on this industry and how we're able to help these business owners successfully transition. So I think that there is, I think we're still just scratching the surface, right? I think that from a community size perspective, right, we're in the 10,000 SEPA mark, give or take, right? I think that there's more of that to come, right? I'd love to see every advisor at every business owner's advisory table hold the certification, right? I think that that's a dream for all of us to say, as a teams of SEPAs working with all these business owners. I think we still have a ways to go there. But I also think about, like, what's beyond that, right? Like, we look at the baby boomers that are transitioning in the next 5 to 10 years and the Gen X behind them. But, one of the questions still, I think, is who's buying all these businesses, right? But what happens when this wealth transfer, the silver tsunami, all the words that people have been talking about for the past decade happens? Like, what happens to the industry then? And how are we positioning exit planning as just good business strategy, right? That exit is now, right? That even as the new ownership comes into place, like, that they're planning for their eventual exit, even if that looks like it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I think that's what really excites me, is it's not just impacting the current set of business owners, but what does the industry become beyond that? Yeah,
and just, I like that, having a SEPA at every seat at the table, right? Is that what I see happening with the designation is it becomes the foundation of wanting to work with business owners, is that you get your very technical designations after you've earned the SEPA designation, because the SEPA designation sets your foundation and mindset for how you're going to approach and work with owners. Well, Josh, I appreciate you coming on the show again and sharing a little bit of your kind of real-time story here at EPI over the last decade of your career and life. We are moving into we're going to continue down the culture and people route. And in our next segment, we're going to have one of my dear friends named Ben Utek, who today is a chief culture officer, but is also a Super Bowl champion, won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, and was coached by Tony Dungy, somebody else that was very much into the betterment of people and culture. We laid the foundation with Fred and Josh over the last few episodes here on Exit Is Now, and what we will do when Ben comes on is we're going to start to structure it. Ben has a book called The Champion's Creed, and inside of that book he talks about how to document culture, make it measurable and manageable and scalable for the future, something that you've heard over the last 3 episodes of us talking about here at EPI, going from 50 employees to nearly 100 employees in the matter of 3 years. So that's up next on March 4th. So please listen and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. I ask you to share the show if you like the episode that you heard. Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.